21st of Morning Star, 4E202, Day 158. Last night I dreamed. I dreamed of leathery wings beating in the sky, scythe-like teeth ripping flesh, lashing tails crushing bone. In storms of fire and ice and blood they came, and everything was destroyed in the path of their coming. I dreamed of men screaming and dying, pleading for mercy from the gods as they fell. Women weeping for the loss of everyone and everything they held dear. I dreamed of the gods, of their mercy, of their intervention as they bestowed a great gift upon mankind, a gift they could use to fight the beasts. I dreamed of voices on the wind and in the clouds, voices shouting ancient and mysterious words, words that few could comprehend, but the dragons knew. And in my dreams the dragons fell. Wherever the voices spoke, wherever they shouted, the dragons heard, and they feared. I dreamt that the voices chased them into the sky, chased them to their mountaintop lairs, and they were hunted. Great heroes of mankind chased the dragons, and there was no place they could hide where the voices did not reach them. When I awoke, full daylight was upon us. I was drenched in sweat, the horror and the hope of those dreams not quite faded with the night. There was something in them I should know, something I do know, but it seems locked in the recesses of my mind. No matter how hard I try, I cannot bring it forth. My headache is gone, but my head is full as I write these words. I cannot help feeling that something profound and momentous happened in those ruins yesterday. But I cannot remember, and Uthgerd saw and heard nothing except me collapsing on the stone floor, while a cry of despair ripped from my throat. She says that the sound was almost inhuman, and it chilled her to the bone. She is not taken to flights of fancy, nor is she afraid of anything. But I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes as she told the story, and she does not want to speak about it. In silence, we packed up our things and headed for the sleeping giant to get some breakfast. Mingling with the townsfolk was heartening, and we both seemed more like ourselves by the time we visited Lucan to return the claw. He was overjoyed to have it back, and he paid us handsomely. I bartered a few items we had picked up in the barrows. Then we mounted up and rode to Whiterun. During the ride, I mulled over the Dragonstone and Farengar's words. Could this really be a map of dragon burial sites? And what is the significance of such a thing? The dragons have all been dead for centuries, haven't they? And if they are all dead, how can they be coming back? When we dismounted in the Whiterun stables, I took a few moments with paper and charcoal to make a rubbing of the Dragonstone. One side does indeed appear to be a map. The other is covered in runes. I do not understand any of this, but I felt it was important to make a copy before handing it over to Farengar. I do not know why. Perhaps it was just my insatiable curiosity. I intended to head straight for Dragon's Reach when we arrived, but the trip had left me utterly exhausted. I guess I had not yet fully recovered from the strange happenings of the day before. At Uthgerd's urging, we spent the rest of the day at her house. I decided to make the visit to Farengar in the morning. "22nd of Morning Star, 4E202, Day 159. Feeling rested and full of energy, I was eager to visit Farengar. When we arrived, he was deep in conversation with a woman wearing a deep cowl to hide her face. I overheard something about Farengar's research into the dragons being associated with the woman's employers. As soon as they realized we were there, however, they abruptly ended their conversation. This seemed very suspicious. What can this woman have to do with dragons? And who is her mysterious employer? I handed over the dragonstone to Farengar, who seemed surprised we had come back alive, as did his female visitor. Farengar then went on to say that she is the one who had discovered its location. The woman left shortly after we arrived, but I stayed to question Farengar. It seemed from the rest of our discussion that he knew little about the woman and had no idea who employed her. Before I could probe further, the Jarl's bodyguard came running into the room and announced that a dragon had been spotted nearby at the western watchtower. Farengar got very excited, but Irileth and I immediately worried for the safety of the city. We all listened as a guard from the watchtower reported his story about the dragon. It had not yet attacked when he left to warn the Jarl, but I think we all feared the worst. Jarl Balgruuf asked me to go with Irileth to investigate. Apparently, since I was at Helgen, they think I have some sort of experience fighting dragons. In my experience, the best thing to do is run. Regardless, I could not leave these people to fight it alone, and so we followed Irileth to the watchtower. As we were leaving, the Jarl took me aside to thank me for helping Farengar. He gifted me with some magical armor, and said he would inform his steward that I could buy property in the city. It was a pleasant surprise, but I declined to take him up on the offer. While I appreciated his generosity, I did not really need a second house. I also did one last little thing before we left Dragon's Reach. I stole the book that the woman had left for Farengar. It was very wrong of me, and I am ashamed of myself. But for some inexplicable reason, I feel compelled to help get to the bottom of this dragon mystery. I know that Farengar is supposed to be doing all the research. Maybe he can even learn more than I from this book. Yet he does not have the personal experience that I bring to the mission. Once I have read the book and copied any important passages, I will return it. We ran to catch up with Irileth, pulling on armor and strapping on weapons as we went. We found her just inside the gates of the city, addressing a group of guards. She gave a rousing speech, and the guards cheered. I, on the other hand, stood grimly as I listened, because I knew what we were about to face. Most of these men were likely to die, not find the glory that Irileth was describing. I could not be as eager as she seemed to be leading men to their death. As we approached the watchtower, we could see the flames left behind from the dragon's attack. Irileth told everyone to spread out and search for survivors. I found several guards cowering inside the tower. They were in a panic, yelling about the dragon coming back. I heard Irileth shout, "Here he comes!" and rushed outside with my bow drawn. I expected to see the same black beast I'd seen in Helgen, but it was not him. I could scarcely believe my eyes. This dragon was just as huge, but it was not the same one. In that moment, the full, horrifying possibility hit me that dragons, plural, had returned. Stifling my terror at the thought, I pulled my attention back to the one unleashing chaos around me. Somehow I managed to stay out of its fire while peppering it full of arrows. Pass after pass it came, speaking in a guttural tongue that I felt I could almost understand. It was like that moment when I first heard the black dragon at Helgen, but with more clarity than before. I knew in some strange way that this dragon's name was Murmelnir. I could not help feeling that he was magnificent, even with the awesome destruction he left in his wake. It was a long and difficult battle, but finally the great beast fell to our arrows, weapons, and spells. Just before he fell, the dragon spoke to me, and somehow I understood. He called to me as he died. He called to me by name, and it made me feel sad and ashamed, almost as if I had betrayed my own kind. With a great shudder, Murmelnir's grounded body went still and silent. Grimly approaching the massive form, I could feel him yet. I could feel his power even through death, feel his anger and his hatred for men. I lay one bare hand against his leathery neck, and suddenly I felt that power flowing into me, power stronger than anything I could imagine. I roared with it. I was Dova, immortal, a god. I could crush these mortals in my claws, snap their bones with my teeth. They were weak and worthless creatures. Nothing could stop me, for my master was the devourer of souls, and I was his instrument of death. I write these words now exactly as they played through my mind at the time. The rage, the arrogance, the condescension that washed through me were not my own. As the flow of power from the dragon subsided, so too did his emotions. I can remember the sentiment of what I shouted, but I can no longer remember the precise words. Of the guttural tongue in which I spoke, I am left with a single remembrance, the word fus, which I know means force in the dragon tongue. How I know this is uncertain, although I believe it has something to do with the power I absorbed. Murmelnir's body crumbled to ash, leaving behind an enormous skeleton. Everyone around me stood frozen in shock and awe, shifting only their eyes from me to the bare dragon bones and back again. Once they found their tongues, they began to call me Dragonborn. One brave Nord spoke out among the rest, recounting an ancient legend about great heroes in the past who could defeat dragons by absorbing their souls. He urged me to try shouting, that is, speaking out in the dragon tongue. It is apparently one of the signature gifts of a Dragonborn. Feeling a bit silly, I turned to the crowd and spoke the single word I knew, fus. The power of my voice was almost visible as it pushed everyone before me to the ground. No one was more stunned than I. Not even the Nord who exclaimed, "The voice of the Dragonborn!" or the one who said, "She summons the Thuum." Irileth seemed annoyed and skeptical. I could understand her feelings. I did not know what to make of it all either. The housecarl urged us to head back to the city and inform Jarl Balgruuf that the dragon had been defeated. She and the guards remained at the watchtower to help the survivors and clean up what they could. So Uthgerd, Lola, and I made our way quietly back to Whiterun. I tried not to notice that she glanced my way several times, furrowing her brow. I was not ready to speak of the event, and was grateful for her silence. As if mocking my confusion, a great voice echoed in the sky when we neared the city. It shouted one word, Dovahkiin. Somehow, I knew that the voice was for me, that it was calling my name. I longed to be alone, to sort out my thoughts in privacy. But instead, I walked with reluctant feet back to Whiterun and up to Dragon's Reach. Uthgerd broke the silence just once, commenting that glory only awaits those who triumph. Although I didn't share her thirst for glory, I could certainly agree that we had triumphed that day. In her own blunt way, I knew she was trying to make me feel better. Inside Dragon's Reach, Jarl Balgruuf and his brother were already discussing the voice we heard from the sky. The steward pulled me forward to interrupt their conversation with news of the watchtower. I told a simple story of the destroyed building and subsequent death of the dragon. Balgruf must have noticed something in my tone, for he insisted there must be more to the story. I was finally forced to admit that I had absorbed some kind of power from the dragon. Rather than laugh or mock me, he seemed excited. "It really was a summons from the Greybeards," he exclaimed. I felt a bit foolish for having to ask who the Greybeards were, but he just smiled and patiently answered all of my questions. Now, I am to travel to High Hrothgar, to the top of the mountain named the Throat of the World. It is the home of the Greybeards, who are apparently masters of the Way of the Voice. It is they who called to me as we neared the city, and it is they who can teach me more about what has happened. Honestly, I do not know if I want to go. I had a plan, a path laid out for myself, and now my life seemed to be spiraling out of control. I could not possibly be this Dragonborn they spoke of, singled out of all humankind to receive such a gift. It had all come about so suddenly, so unexpectedly. Surely I would have known if I were destined for greatness. Would there not have been some sign before now? I have never sought power. I do not want power. Mars mercy, what do I do now? 23rd of Morning Star, 4E202, Day 160. After my audience with the Jarl, I needed to get away to think. I released Uthgerd, telling her that I did not know if or when I would be traveling again. Lola and I made it home to the cottage as night fell. While going through all of my things in a state of melancholic nostalgia, I came across a book I'd forgotten about. It was a book I'd picked up in Helgen. Why did everything always point back to Helgen? This tome, called the Book of the Dragonborn, held some answers. According to an all-but-forgotten myth, Akatosh had once gifted mankind with his blood, the blood of the dragon. This gift allowed the honored individual to absorb the power of dragons. Such Dragonborn warriors became great dragon slayers, and rulers who were also Dragonborn were considered to be the most legitimate. The book ends with a prophecy and suggests that the true importance of Akatosh's gift may yet be unrealized. The final verse references a world eater and the existence of the last Dragonborn. I lay awake in bed for some time, unable to sleep, with thoughts whirling through my head. When I finally drifted off, it was a blessedly dreamless sleep. I woke feeling more at peace than yesterday. I was still confused about everything that had happened and everything I'd been told, and was still uncertain of my future or what my next action should be. But the feeling of near panic had dissipated. I pored over the Book of the Dragonborn again over breakfast, and then again several more times before deciding that I needed some fresh air. I spent the rest of the day outside, tending the garden, assembling the water barrel, and tanning armfuls of hides. I worked into the dark, methodically stretching and scraping hides in a mindless rhythm. Having just finished a very late supper, my tired muscles are ready for sleep.